Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the media availability for the House and Senate Republicans. Before we get started, I'll remind everyone that this Friday is the cutoff date by which policy bills have to make it out of committee. I'm Kimberly Wirtz, the Communications Director for the Senate Republicans. Today we have with us Senate Republican Leader John Braun, representing the 20th Legislative District, Senator Keith Gaynor, the lead Republican on the Senate Housing Committee from the 12th Legislative District, House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbury from the 31st Legislative District, and Representative April Connors from the 8th Legislative District, and Representative Connors is the Republican floor leader in the House. Before today's event, you should have received information from the Senate about a package of housing bills, several of which are scheduled for hearings this week. And with that, I will turn it over to Senator Braun for opening comments.
Well, thank you, Kim. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Week 6 of the session, so we're moving right along. As Kim said, it's cut off for Policy Committee on Friday, so a lot of activity as we wrap up the first third of the session. I'll just remind you, the group, you've heard me say this lots of times before, but we're focused on the same things we've been focused on for a while, public safety, and it's good to see the bill that would allow more funding for local law enforcement moving its way through the Senate. Unfortunately, we also have a lot of bad public safety bills that are being considered by the Senate majority. We're hopeful that those don't make it through, but we'll see what happens there. Happy to talk about those if you'd like. Affordability, food, gas, housing, childcare, healthcare, increasingly unaffordable in our state. As Kim said, we've been working hard on a housing package. It's one of the key aspects of affordability here in our state, and we have our ranking member, Keith Gaynor, here to talk about those bills if you'd like. And those are bills that some have been out for a while, some have been released more recently, but make a comprehensive package that would allow hopefully lower cost to our citizens around the state if enacted. So we're working hard on that. And then finally, K-12. Lots going on in K-12. If you watched last week, we had a hearing on some of the big expensive bills being thought about for K-12, from funding materials, supplies, and operating costs, MSOC, to transportation, to special education. These are very expensive bills when you to fully fund all this, and very challenging in the budget situation we have, but something we certainly have to consider how we get there, make sure our K-12 system is properly funded, and more importantly, that we are actually getting the results, the outcomes that we need out of K-12. So a lot of work happening there. I'll stop right there. There's a ton to talk about, but I'll turn it over to Representative Stokesbury, who I don't see on the call. Well, I guess we'll go to questions. Oh, there he is. Drew, you're just in time. You're up.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the technical delay on my end. House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbury here. Also with me is our House Republican floor leader from the 8th District in the Tri-Cities area, April Connors. I missed what John said, so apologies if we double up, but House Republicans are continuing to do the same things that we've been talking about since week 1, looking for solutions to make Washington more affordable, make Washington more safe, improve the delivery of services in state government, whether that be K-12 education or what have you. And one of the overarching topics for all of session is how we're going to solve our budget challenge. And so House Republicans are looking for ways to improve the efficiency of government, root out some of the wasteful, ineffective spending, and figure out a way out of here without raising taxes. There have been an occasional Democrat that has been interested in helping us with those things. Perhaps Bob Ferguson has been the most interested of any Democrat. But unfortunately, the majority of the House Democratic caucus seems to be wanting to go in another direction. Rather than do things like toughen up penalties for manufacturers and dealers of fentanyl, Democrats are moving bills that would reduce criminal sentences for things like gun offenses. So two pretty starkly different visions for the future of Washington. Republicans looking for ways to keep Washington more safe and more affordable. Democrats continuing to move bills out of Public Safety Committee that center the criminal rather than the victim, continuing to propose all kinds of new taxes, many of which would be extremely regressive. And it's, continues to be ironic that the caucus that talks about how regressive our tax code is only ever talks about raising taxes on the working class and never entertains discussions of cutting taxes on the working class. But we're about a third of the way done with session now. Policy cutoff is coming up. We'll know the universe of bills that we're going to consider for the floor in another week or so. And I think House Republicans will fight really hard to get our priorities that have made it out of committee through the House floor, and work really hard to stop some of the wrong-headed policy that would continue to take Washington in the wrong direction that unfortunately too many House Democrats and House Democrat leadership seem hell-bent on moving anyway, despite all the data showing Washington being on the wrong track. So with that, I will turn it back over to John, and I assume we'll take questions next.
I think, Kim, if you want to go ahead and start up.
You bet. So first I will go to Jerry Cornfield with the Washington State Standard.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my questions. In about 45 minutes, Senator Braun and Representative Stokesbury, you're going to be meeting with the governor. What is on your agenda? What do you want to bring up with him and talk about this week?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Of course, we're continuing to follow up on the things he indicated we shared common ground on early in the session, emergency powers, and that bill is currently scheduled to move out of committee on Friday. So we have the money for local law enforcement. I'm not sure that will be a topic. The broad budget issues are probably going to be, my guess is going to be a top topic. I know that he is, I think you probably know as well, his directive to the agencies to provide a 6% reduction opportunities have been delivered. I know that they're vetting those. I don't know if he's quite ready to share those publicly yet, but I'm sure that'll be part of the conversation. And then, I think, I imagine there'll be a ton of, a bunch of other topics, but those are the ones I would say were most likely to be discussed.
Yeah, I'll echo what Senator Braun says. I mean, for one, we're in the same meeting, so if he's bringing up a topic, it's going to be a topic. But I think that is probably top of our minds right now. I've said this before, but for the first time this is my 11th session, so for the first time since I've been elected, we have a governor that seems to be living on the same planet as the rest of us. And a governor that wants to engage with the legislature and improve the delivery of services that his administration is responsible for delivering. So we're certainly not going to agree with everything, but we're going to look for those areas of agreement. And yet, to Senator Braun's point, Governor Ferguson has asked his agencies pretty sternly to carefully review their budgets and find some areas where we can cull spending. If we were to pass a budget that simply maintained the level of spending we had in 2023, we'd have $1 billion surplus. So it shouldn't take that much to get us back to fiscal sanity and avoid $10 or $15 billion of new taxes. And so that data just was sent from the agencies to the governor's office last week, I believe. My understanding is that some of the nonpartisan budget staff has begun to look through that. I haven't seen anything yet myself, but I'm excited to talk to the governor about his views on that and where he thinks his administration ought to go next. There's a few other topics that we've been talking about throughout session. Many are ones that the governor brought up in his inaugural address. He talked about the Homes for Heroes bill, which is sponsored by April Connors, who's on the call with us. That ran into some problems in committee, and the governor was able to help ensure it got a hearing. I read an article from you, Jerry, yesterday that the governor was instrumental in keeping the emergency powers reform bill alive over in the Senate. The governor's continued to engage with stakeholders on funding for more law enforcement officers. And there's a new bill from House Republican Tom Dent to try to fix the lingering issue regarding implementation of the ag fuel exemption from the CCA that Governor Inslee pretended was fixed, even though no other person on earth believed it to be fixed. And Governor Ferguson has signaled that he wants to try to fix that. And so we've got a bill to begin that process. And so, I imagine we'll check in about a few of those things. Probably the one other topic I'll bring up is that was put on my radar recently. Healthcare Authority and a couple members of House Democratic leadership are pushing a bill to shift a significant share of state costs onto hospitals. Hospitals have been struggling immensely. They continue to lose money hand over fist, and year after year since COVID have been operating at losses and having to dig into the reserves. Healthcare Authority seems to have the opposite picture and seems to think that hospitals are flush with cash. So they and a senior House Democrat are pushing a bill to essentially shift some of the state's burden onto the hospitals. And so I kind of want to check in with Governor Ferguson about that and talk to him about some of the struggles that hospitals in my district and other Republican districts are facing, so that the administration understands that shifting those costs back on hospitals is not a good way to balance our budget.
Jerry, did you have a follow-up question?
Sure. I'm going to switch to the other Washington. Senator Braun, Representative Stokesbury, again, the Republicans are in charge of Congress. We have a very active Republican president. You guys have been pretty silent throughout his first month of administration, but do you have any concerns about the impact on your communities on some of the decisions and actions he's been taking? We've been hearing from members of Congress about layoffs at Hanford, layoffs of agents, federal agencies, contracts, research dollars. All of these things have reached into Washington state. You two have been silent. Can you tell us now if you're concerned about any of those decisions or not?
Well, I would say to a certain extent, what's really happening and what's not happening is still a little blurry, candidly. I mean, clearly there are impacts when you change the federal budget. There's also impacts when you don't change the federal budget. We're running a tremendous deficit, and I think that one of the key efforts in Washington, D.C. ought to be to try to get our budget in line. Now, that's not an easy task. I'm not going to, I frankly don't have enough information to weigh in on what may help and what may not help by doing other harm. So I've been quiet just because it's not clear what's happening. I do think that an ambitious review of federal spending, just like an ambitious review of state spending, is worthwhile and helps us understand what we're spending our money on and whether there's broad public support for it and what the implications are for both the federal government and state government. I think the most concerning area is what might happen with Medicaid. I think that's going to play itself out over the next several months as they work on some budget bills. I don't think that's something that's going to happen based on the executive's review of the budget and spending. I think that's something that's going to happen longer term. A move has been suggested to block grants for Medicaid. That can be done. I think that could be done well. It could also be done poorly. So a lot will have to do with how it actually comes, how it's actually presented, and what the impact is on our state. So I think it's much too early. And in spite of the enormous activity in our reported activity in Washington, D.C., I think it's really hard to tell yet, with some very specific exceptions, what the impact on our state is going to be. We had the memo from a couple weeks ago now that essentially stopped funding for Medicaid for 6 hours. That was a big deal. It was an error, quickly corrected, and I don't think that's been an issue so far. There's some other stuff that has raised concerns, like for instance with federally qualified health centers and how they're funded through certain grants. So a lot of that's come up. Most of the stuff where it seemed to be doing harm has been backed up pretty quickly. So I think there's no intention to do harm. They're just taking a very rigorous scrub of the federal budget. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. I think we have a real deficit issue that we got to address somehow. We don't address it by doing nothing.
Yeah, I'll echo what Senator Braun said. I mean, Jerry, to your point about us being relatively quiet, I mean, I've been saying it from the beginning. No matter who's president, we were all elected to state office to fix our state's problems, and there's other elected officials that were elected to federal office to solve the country's problems. And I don't think we do our voters a very good service if they send us to Olympia to fix the state's problems. Fewest police officers per capita, growing crime rates, among the top 5 most expensive states for gas, groceries, housing, least affordable childcare, failing school systems. I don't think it does our voters any favors to spend all of our time talking about national issues when they sent us here to solve the state's many pressing issues. But to the extent, as you point out, from time to time, national decisions do have ramifications for solving some of Washington's problems, and to the extent that those two intersect, then yeah, I think it is our job to advocate for this Washington. But to Senator Braun's point, I think in a lot of ways it's too early to tell exactly what is happening. He mentioned there was an issue with Medicaid payments that lasted 6 hours. There's been a lot of talk, but I don't think there's much certainty about any decisions being made yet. Unclear if things are temporary or permanent, and so as the new administration settles in, I think we'll try to advocate for this Washington as best we can. But I'm not going to get worked up into a huge panic over things I can't control, and things that might not be permanent, might not be intentional, and might just be part of the growing pains of a new administration settling into their new roles.
Okay, and with that, we will go to Sophia Schwartzwalder from Seattle Times. Go ahead, Sophia.
Hi, good morning. I had a question about Senate Bill 5382, which is scheduled for the executive session today. It has to do with additional verifying on the ballot measures, so any of the initiatives. Just kind of curious what the thoughts are on that, and if there are concerns that this is potentially going to make the process either more difficult or costly to the state.
Yeah, this is a bill, we refer to it as the initiative killer. It most certainly will make the people putting initiatives together, collecting signatures, more difficult, less democratic. It's not clear that this bill is even constitutional. What is clear is it's a bad idea. We don't have, even today, we had a big year last year with initiatives, but if you look over the last 10 years, we actually have had quite a bit fewer initiatives than we've had in the past. It is very difficult to collect the number of signatures required to put an initiative before the legislature or the people. This bill would make it much, much more difficult with significant penalties for folks who might get the wrong answer, either intentionally or unintentionally. So I think it's a bad bill that is not. It's kind of odd. We've had bills for many years from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle that were pro-democracy and pro-voter. This seems just the opposite. This is pushing aside the voter because they aren't happy with the initiatives that were put before them last year.
Yep, I agree with what Senator Braun said. It is frustrating that Democrats in the legislature seem like they will not be content until they have all the power to control everything and stifle any dissent. For as much as they criticize Trump and accuse him of having authoritarian tendencies, boy, some of the stuff that they're doing sure looks like stifling dissent to me. Whether it's their rule change at the start of session to make it easier to end debate on important bills before the legislature. In our communications offline, the speaker essentially said that she views the Republicans' job to help her do her job, that she wanted to change the rule because Republicans were making it too hard for the majority to pass their bills, and she wanted to make it easier for the majority to pass its bills, and thought that stifling dissent would help her do that. Same thing with this bill. We've seen it with other initiative related bills over time. When our state was founded in the late 1800s, our founders thought it very important to give the voters and the public access to direct democracy. The threshold is high, like Senator Braun said. Not just any guy or gal on a lark can get an initiative on the ballot. It takes a lot of work, often a lot of funding to gather enough signatures to get it on the ballot. Over the last 10 or so years, I think there have been overall, on average, a reasonable number of amendments. But anytime there has been an an initiative that Democrats don't like, they've run to the State House to change the rules. They have got rid of tax impact advisory statements. They go to court to overturn initiatives they don't like. They added a fiscal impact statement to the ballot, and now they want to make it even harder for initiatives to qualify in the first place. If I were just an average person out there who had a variety of opinions about current events, I'd be very concerned that House Democrats have a tendency to suppress any dissent and alternative views to their party orthodoxy. It's very troubling.
Sophia, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick one. As we get closer to that first cutoff and there's going to be more debate on the floor, are you concerned about seeing that shutdown of discussion coming into play?
No, I'm not acutely concerned. It won't change Republican strategy one bit. We've probably passed about 20 or 30 bills so far this session. The vast majority of bills, candidly, don't do that much. They're mostly making very modest changes to state law. Oftentimes, very, very narrow area. Example I'll give is I think my very first bill in the legislature, my first term, there is some ambiguity as to whether forensic accountants who had a CPA license also needed a private investigator's license to do their forensic accounting job. I passed a bill to clarify that they only needed one professional license, not two. It was, important for the couple dozen or couple hundred forensic auditors in the state. Didn't have a big impact beyond that. That's what most of the bills we deal with are. If Republicans were only interested in slowing things down, we would stand up 39 members to give 10-minute speeches on all of these, small bills that affect some very small pocket of state government or the state's business. We're not interested in doing that. But if there are bills that are going to represent significant changes to Washington policy that are going to make Washington worse, we were all elected by 150,000 constituents to come to Olympia and represent them on the House floor. We're not gonna be quiet. And the threat of the majority party shutting down debate is not going to be enough to actually make Republicans spend less time advocating for our districts. If Democrats really want to invoke the rule and cut off debate, they're going to have to own it. But they're definitely not going to accomplish getting Republicans to complain less about their terrible ideas by threatening Republicans.
I'm going to just add in as the head of the floor team for the House Republicans that we've been working very hard in the background to be prepared for this session. We have a really strong team, and we also have a strong group of 39 members who are very capable of saying their statements and getting their message out on the House floor. And so we will be, should they try to shut us down, we will be prepared this session. And so we are determined to have those 3 million Washingtonians' voices heard throughout Washington state should we be threatened and shut down from speaking.
Thank you, Sophia. And next we will go to Carlene Johnson. Carlene, do you have anything? Go for it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about, I attended the rally that was here in Olympia on Saturday, fight for parents' rights, I think, with Let's Go Washington and GOP members and the Family Policy Institute all supporting that. It was really cold and really rainy, but there were about 300 people who showed up still. And several of the speakers suggested if Senate Bill 5181 to gut the Parental Bill of Rights is passed, that it would be like the last straw for a lot of families who've maybe stuck it out in Washington public schools and maybe were encouraged after the Parental Bill of Rights passed last year. But now the suggestion is this will lead to a further exodus of students from the public school system. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and also ask, is there any hope of stopping this thing from your perspective? And any members could respond. Thank you.
Well, yeah, as you said, 5181 is a bad bill. We had a long debate on the floor of the Senate. We did make it slightly better than it was when the debate started. We added 3 amendments that improved the bill. Still a bad bill that divides parents from their students. It undermines the relationship between parents and the school districts, and frankly, breaks trust with the school districts, the K-12 education system more broadly. And I think that's exactly what you would have heard on Saturday is folks have deep concerns about how the majority in the legislatures have continued to use the K-12 school system for ideological reasons. We've seen a tremendous drop in our academic outcomes as a result, at least it's partly as a result of that. And parents are frustrated. They fought hard to get this initiative in front of the legislature. It was adopted unanimously. They felt like they were on a better path, and immediately a year later, the majority comes back and undermines part of the bill, part of the initiative rather. So yeah, I think there's a lot of frustration, and that we're in a very precarious situation with our K-12 system. I'm a big supporter of our public education system, but we're in a tough spot, right? We have declining outcomes. We have a tremendous loss of faith in the system, a breakdown in trust, and parents have already been making decisions not to put their kids in the public education system for a few years, and this very well could drive it over the edge. I don't know. I think it's a very risky bill to pass just so that the majority Democrats can satisfy their ideological backers. That's all this is about.
I just go ahead and add that, last year on the House floor, when this initiative bill passed, the House Democrats said that they didn't think that there was anything in that Parental Bill of Rights that wasn't already allowed within the schools. And they all supported, like Senator Braun said, there was a lot of support for the initiative bill to be passed last year. And so to see them coming back and making massive changes to the bill is discouraging to the House Republicans. Also, the bill on the House side is actually in the Rules Committee. We have a rules poll today, so it'll be interesting to see what bills actually will be headed to the House floor, or if they're going to try to use the Senate bill as a vehicle. But I was not able to attend that rally, but I understand it was well attended and some great statements were made. But I do think parents are very concerned. We were, I think, happy to have at least a parental school choice bill that was heard in the House. I don't think it will move out, but we did get to hear that as well this session.
Did you have a follow-up, Carlene?
I do. I kind of wanted further comments on the package of the housing bills that are being introduced, kind of juxtaposing those with the efforts of the majority party that, rent control and preventing development really with, limiting amount of properties that, can be owned or developed. I just wanted a couple of comments on those package of bills.
Well, I'd be happy to comment. Actually, there are a number of bills that we as Republicans have sponsored, and we're trying to deal with the density issue. And what's a little bit ironic to me, the last 20 years I've been in public office as a county commissioner and now the legislature, and we've been always trying to get more flexibility. And we have seen some movement here in these last, particularly this session. We do have more of a receptance to moving toward a higher density, but we aren't doing it in the planning process. It would have been much more beneficial had we given more flexibility to those local governments. But having said that, we do have bills that we have some multifamily tax exemptions that would encourage the multifamily structures. We have middle housing bills for both the urban and the rural areas. So those will create some more housing units. We're also concerned about, the permitting process. It has been so onerous and cumbersome for people and it drives up the cost of housing. So we've had bills that would streamline some of that permitting. And then the other side of this, the whole housing issue that we're going to be talking about this week is rent control and trying to, control those who actually are providing housing and their ability to actually be profitable and keep those houses in good repair. So there's a wide array of bills that we are trying to push forward. And as you've mentioned, the cutoff date is Friday. We have some bills that we hope to get, out of committee and at least have more conversation about them on the floor.
I'm gonna just pipe in here, Carlene, if I can. I'm also on the House Housing Committee and have been since I started here, and it has been difficult to get any additional supply bills through, especially for rural communities in Washington State. This year, the House Housing Committee spent all interim preparing a large package of bills that we presented. A lot of them were pre-filed this session. Some of them are still moving. Rep. Barkis's lot splitting bill is still moving, but they're in the rural ADU bill, which would allow an accessory dwelling unit for folks that live outside of the urban growth boundaries, is still moving right now. But we also had some substantial bills in relation to trying to combat having rent control in Washington State. We had a tenant assistance program that would give people a hand up until we can stabilize our actual production in Washington State. We also had a permit reform bill that would have allowed architects and engineers, if they were licensed in the state of Washington, if the cities and counties couldn't get to those permits within their allotted time frame, that those architects and engineers could help move those permits out. Unfortunately, that bill died. We had another bill to expand urban growth boundaries just where there was infrastructure across the street. So if people couldn't build on one side of the street, if there was water, sewer, and electricity running down the street, they should be able to use the other side for housing. That bill is not moving out. So we are doing a lot of RLTA reform bill that won't be heard this session. So there's a lot of people that are struggling with the housing piece, and the rent control is the big push for the House Democrats this year. But we're already hearing from developers from across Washington State that say if this bill goes into effect, actually with even the hint of this bill going into effect, they're already starting to leave the state of Washington. I said in my House Appropriations speech, this is a great bill for Idaho, rent control is a great bill for Montana, and it's a great bill for Arizona because that's where we're hearing the developers are going right now. So we have grave concerns in the House that this bill is actually going to decrease the supply and decrease the affordability and be worse for renters in the state House. So the Senate Housing Committee is doing a great job as well. The House has also been working really hard on our supply side.
Yeah, I'll add one thing. I think, when it comes to rent control, I think it's broadly understood by the more thoughtful folks on the other side of the aisle. This is a bad idea, bad policy. It's not a Republican idea. That's most of the economists in our world say, price control and rent control in particular are a bad idea. It's really harmful on capital investment. We need folks to invest in Washington State. What the Senate Majority Leader, Jamie Peterson, has said is that he wants to pass rent control, but he also wants to pass a suite of pro-development, pro-housing bills. The challenge we have is that suite of pro-housing, pro-development bills just isn't. It's out there from both the House Republicans and the House and the Senate Republicans, but so far there's not much of it moving forward. Now we're not done yet. Cutoff's not here quite yet, so maybe some of it will, and we'll have a good sweep. But the idea that we're going to do, that the majority wants to proceed forward with a very harmful rent control bill and not do anything for development is I think a bad sign for future of housing in the state of Washington.
Thank you.
And I'll add one point. I'm going to agree with everything everybody said. I think April and John both explained really well why rent control will lead to less housing supply and eventually more expensive housing. That's not the only Democratic bill that would raise the price of housing in play this session. House Bill 1480 from Representative Rommel would allow counties to impose a local real estate excise tax. Can't make housing more expensive. Can't make housing more affordable if we're making it more expensive. Just last week, the local government committee voted out a bill, House Bill 1254 by Representative Durer, that testimony said would add $24,000 to the cost of a new housing unit, you know, in a middle class, working class neighborhood like DuPont. Again, we can't make housing more affordable if we're making it more expensive, but while we appreciate Democrats willing to work with us from time to time on increasing supply, increasing density, Democrats are continuing to do things like pursuing bills like rent control that'll reduce supply and raise costs, bills like the wildland urban interface that will just add more money to the cost of building a new home, or creating more real estate excise taxes that will just add to the cost of buying and selling a home. If we want to make housing more affordable, we got to stop making it more expensive.
Thank you, Carlene. Okay, next we will go to Simone Carter from McClatchy. Go ahead, Simone.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for taking my question. I'm curious. So I saw a viral tweet last week. It was somebody who gave testimony on a bill in the House. She included in her tweet a video showing some lawmakers appearing to be texting on their phones while she was delivering testimony. Lawmakers talking among one another. And so she said that she effectively felt ignored. And then State Representative Jim Walsh actually replied, and he argued that sometimes lawmakers are reading the relevant bill, staff analysis, or other public comments while testifiers are speaking. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that. Do you agree, or yeah, what do you think?
Well, you know, I think it's certainly going to vary by legislator, but you know, in my experience, I am when I was on committees, I would often have my computer or phone with me. There is a lot to juggle. There are several thousand bills that get introduced during session. A lot of us need to track most of those in some capacity or another. We get hundreds of emails a day. Most of us have meetings in 10 or 15-minute increments because that's about the only way you can arrange your schedule and meet with everybody who wants to meet with you. So yeah, I do think it's common for legislators to multitask. I think my experience aligns with what Jim Walsh explained, that in committee, you know, we are often looking up, reading the bill report. I know for me, I learn information a lot better if I'm reading it than if I hear it. So I will often be reading the bill report alongside the briefing because I'll absorb it way better if I get to read the words printed on the page rather than have to rely only on listening. You know, oftentimes we're looking up more information about the bill during testimony, you know, but we might also need to be multitasking and replying to emails. You know, I said this in the context of a different question, but we represent 150,000 people. There's not enough hours in the day to only be able to do one thing at a time around here. So you can either say, I'm not going to reply to any of my constituents that email me. I'm not going to meet with anybody who wants to come meet with me. Or you can say, all right, I'm going to try to meet with everybody. I'm going to try to reply to all my emails, but from time to time, I might need to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think most, you know, I'm sure there's exceptions, but most of the time, most legislators on both sides of the aisle, you know, care about the emails we get. They care about the people that walk through our door. They care about the people coming to testify. We're simply, you know, a group of part-time citizen legislators trying to balance all of it crunched into a 60 or 105-day session.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this tweet. This happened in the House, but I think it's very similar in the Senate. I mean, we are. I think folks on both sides of the aisle are trying to do their best. I'm certainly sympathetic to folks that come and testify and don't feel like they're fully listened to. I don't think that's a great outcome, and we should work hard to prevent that. But we also have a lot of things to pull together. So I don't think we should make excuses on this. I think we should just redouble our efforts to really listen to everybody that's in front of us and also respond to everybody else. And we're going to fall short sometimes, but we should do so while trying earnestly to get all the input we can get.
Simone, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. So today there's a bill, Senate Bill 5726, that's up for hearing that would replace the state's shrinking gas tax revenue with a road usage charge. I know that y'all touched on proposals that have to do with taxes earlier in the meeting. There have been proposals about potentially raising property taxes, for instance. Are there any proposals right now that Democrats are pushing that you find particularly egregious, and are there any at all that you would support?
I don't think there's any support right now in my caucus for the road usage charge. This is we clearly have a challenge funding our transportation system. 3 decades of over-reliance on a very high gas tax and very high bonding has put us in a bad position. Add the cap and trade system that's added another 50 cents per gallon. It's really undermined our ability, the way we fund transportation. We clearly need a modern, world-class transportation system. It's going to take funding. But the notion that we're going to solve that problem with a road usage charge, I think, is not realistic. It's not well supported, frankly, on either side of the aisle. It's regressive. It's very hard on rural communities where you likely have to drive further, and it's not protected for in any real way to be used for highways, bridges, and road construction. It's not 18th Amendment protected. So, like in a way that can't be changed by the legislature in any given year. So I don't see there's a future for this. And then the last thing I guess I would say is just from an implementation standpoint, folks have said for years, and I think accurately, that much more difficult to implement with the taxpayers. Unlike the gas tax, which nobody likes the gas tax necessarily either. It's also regressive, but it's much more easily implemented and collected through the distributors. A road usage charge would either require monitoring of your daily travels, which raises privacy issues with both sides of the aisle, or some self-reporting that would be enormously complicated to keep track of. And I think the rough numbers are, the cost of managing the gas tax is like 1%, and the cost of managing a road usage charge is somewhere between 10 and 15%. This is not a solution to the problem we have in front of us. Not a viable solution in my view.
If I could, I just would add that, when you look at the road usage charge, that's people that are obviously on the road, in the same way with the gas tax, but we also have a carbon fee that is added onto the motoring public too, that is being collected, that is not going to the road. So I think there's an opportunity to have some real discussion about where some of the Climate Commitment Act money is actually going, because although it's collected on those who are buying gas, it is not getting reinvested in our infrastructure. And there are some other things within that transportation budget that I believe we could be actually finding revenue within the way things are being collected now, that primarily a sales tax on new vehicles. If that were to be shifted to the transportation budget, that would help definitely fill the hole that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I'll echo what my Senate colleague said. At this stage, I don't think there's any support for Representative Fai's road usage charge bill. I think one absolute non-negotiable would be that any road usage charge be constitutionally protected for roads. The Fai bill does not do that. I think we need a constitutional amendment to explicitly include road usage charges in the definition of transportation revenue in the 18th Amendment. I can read a graph as good as anybody. I understand that gas tax revenue is declining over time because fuel efficiency of vehicles keeps going up, and more people are adopting electric vehicles. That's great. I recognize that creates a structural challenge. But at this stage, I think the only version that I would ever entertain is a replacement of the gas tax with a road usage charge. That's just to begin the conversation. But simply adding a road usage charge on top of what is already one of the highest gas taxes in the state, I think is untenable and unacceptable. When I was running for office the first time, I had 167 running through my district. It was a big topic. At the time, the transportation package had been being debated in the legislature, but nothing had passed yet. Connection of 167 to I-5 was a big part of that. I campaigned on, among other things, getting funding to complete 167. I would knock on people's doors who would tell me that they had been promised this project since before I was born. It's true. Simone, you'll appreciate this. The News Tribune had an article in 1984 talking about a DOT town hall to bring 167 down to I-5. And I was born in 1985. So my first term in the legislature, I ended up voting for the gas tax to fund 167. And a couple years later, DOT comes and says, you know what, we don't, despite that really tough vote, there's not enough money to complete 167. Now you guys have to go raise tolls on 167 to fund completion. A couple years go by, and now they're saying, hey, there's still not enough money to complete 167. You got to raise more taxes again. That's not acceptable. That's not tenable. That's not a good way to do business. I'm optimistic that we got a new governor, a new secretary of transportation. Perhaps we can make some fixes so that this doesn't happen. But for legislators to vote to fund a project and vote for revenue to do that, and then for the administration to be unable to do what they promised, pretty disappointing. Both for me personally and for the 150,000 constituents I represent. So, at this point, I don't want to reward their misbehavior with giving them more of my constituents' tax money. But maybe if they get serious, then we can get serious too.
Okay, and with that, we have to go. I apologize for any reporters who didn't get a chance to ask their questions. I will reach out to you separately, but the leaders have a meeting with the governor they have to get to. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next week.